In today's video, we're going to be talking about my experience with the Modlite PLHv2 handheld light. I purchased this light about 2 years ago, almost exactly. And I actually purchased it with the OKW head and the PLHv2 head, and at the time I was running the Surefire dual fuel M600 light on my 11.5 gun. My initial impressions running these lights, going from the Surefire to the Modlite, what did I notice? First, the spill and the hotspot were much more narrow than what I was used to with the dual fuel. The dual fuel light is an excellent light from Surefire. It is much more suited for CQB type operations and close-in work than it is for more of like a general purpose and work at any kind of distance. So I want to say on that light, you're looking at about 15,000 lumens with only about 16,000 Candela, so it does not push out very far, as opposed to the PLHv2, which has around, I want to say 54,000 Candela advertised on it and about 1,350 lumens. So similar lumen rating with significantly higher Candela. Now, as a side note, this is the 18650 handheld body, and I've been using it with the 18650s. I have not used it with the 18350s. I have seen a review on the PL350 light that showed the specs of the light coming in far below what was advertised from Modlite, so I will link that below and feel free to check that out. Back to my experience with this light. So I noticed the hotspot and the spill were much more narrow. However, I was getting a lot more throw with the light, so that is a plus. Was I able to use the dual fuel out to 100 yards on my AR at nighttime? Absolutely. Did this light do a lot better than it at that distance? Definitely. So this light is more well suited for that sort of thing, and not as well for the CQB or up close work. I would say inside of 25 yards, I would actually prefer the dual fuel personally, and that's just because you get this very wide hotspot with this extremely wide spill, and the spill is very usable. In fact, at a doorway from about 3 yards, you could be at the low ready pointing your barrel at the threshold to that doorway and turn the light on, and you're going to illuminate into that room and all the way to the ceiling. That's how much spill and how wide of a hotspot you're really going to have, which is something I personally really like about the dual fuel. This light, not so much. That spill is not quite as usable as the dual fuel, but it is usable. On that note, the OKW, I would not recommend the OKW unless you're putting it on a scoped gun. And there's a whole discussion to be had on whether or not that's really practical. Personally, I would take the PLHv2 over the OKW because it has plenty of throw to it. Now, let's talk about that for a minute. This seems to be a pretty popular topic online right now, the whole lumens versus Candela. From what I understand, lumens is the brightness of the LED or the brightness of the light at the source, versus Candela is how much goes downrange from this source, how much is actually carried away from the light. So Candela is equivalent to basically your throw, and your lumens is basically the brightness in here. So the question I ask is there a point where Candela is kind of a diminishing return, I guess? And I think that there is. Now, that's not to say if I had a 100,000 Candela, 2 million lumen light, that I wouldn't want that over this. If I can have more capability, I'll take it. However, I think it should be noted that this light has way more throw than your naked eye or my naked eye in a handheld configuration is going to be able to pick up or identify things at nighttime. I did some testing, and I wanted to see what the limit was on my actual eyes on how far I could actually illuminate something at nighttime and identify it. You might be able to see something move at distance at nighttime, but being able to identify what it was or even see a person, So basically in my test, I had a person standing out at 25, 50, 75, 100, and 125 and 150. And I did this on a clear night in the desert. I took out several different lights. Basically, I wanted to see how much of a difference Candela made. Some of those lights with higher Candela seemed to do better than some of the ones with lower, but once I got to about 100 to 125 yards, even the high Candela lights, I could not make out the target. So that is something to note with high Candela. Like, yeah, you're going to be able to push the light out there very far, but just understand there is a limitation to your eyeballs when you don't have magnification to it. If you combine that with magnification, like a scoped gun or something like that, you increase your capability for sure. But without it, just understand that high Candela doesn't mean you're going to actually be able to see things with your naked eye at 200 yards at nighttime. At least it may not mean that. Maybe you have a lot better eyesight than I do. However, with Candela, there are a few advantages. One of the big ones that gets thrown out a lot is defeating photonic barriers. Basically, that means when you have a light source coming at you, I can shine this back that direction and it can push past that light source and illuminate whatever I'm trying to illuminate brighter than the light source coming back at me so that I can see past it. So imagine standing in front of a car. Let's say you're 25 yards in front of a car and the headlights are on and the brights are on and it's facing you and you're trying to turn this on to look to see who's in the driver's seat, who's in the passenger seat. High Candela is going to allow you to push through that a lot easier. Now, I did another experiment like that at 25 yards at nighttime with a SUV with the high beams on. And of course, as you get out to farther distances, the high Candela matters more. So if we were at 75 yards, it might matter a little bit more. But there are a lot of other factors there, and it's really difficult to see into that car, even if you can illuminate it. So I did this at 25 yards, and with my Surefire X300 Ultra, not the new turbo one, but just 1000 lumen Ultra pistol light, I was able to see inside the car very well. Now, that one doesn't have, it's probably got about a fifth of the Candela as this guy. This one was able to punch into the car a lot better, but I still had more than enough light going into that car, and I was still able to identify stuff with my Surefire X300 Ultra. Something else I noticed about this light was the temperature. It is much cooler than a lot of the Surefire lights. The Surefire lights seem to be maybe around 5K or south of that. They're a little bit warmer, a little bit more of a natural light. This one's a little bit bluish. So this one's a little cooler, and what that means is if you had two lights that are identical in performance, but one is warmer and one is cooler, the cooler one is probably going to appear brighter to most of us than the warmer one. So it does brighten the light a little bit, at least to our eyes, but it does wash out colors too, and it does reflect more if you have smoke or mist or something in the air. It's going to reflect a lot of that back at you more so than a warmer light. Now, continuing on my experience with this light, I do need to talk about all the problems, and yes, there is quite a few of them that I had with this light. At a certain point, to be honest, I wanted to just ditch everything I had that was Modlite. But let me get through my story because ultimately I will be keeping this light. But essentially, shortly after I got this light, I started noticing that I was not having the battery life I should. I kept getting it flashing at me, indicating there was a low battery or it was below 3 volts and that the batteries needed charge. But it was like I felt like I had only used it for about 5 minutes throughout the day and the battery's almost dead. I noticed that the nipples on the 18650 batteries that came with the light were crushed in. I also noticed that my spring inside the head here was also crushed in. So evident of probably having some sort of connectivity issues. Now, I don't know if that was actually a defect with the battery. I have a suspicion that that was a contributing factor to it. But one of the other things I noticed is this tail cap right here, this button is very sensitive. And I had just a massive amount of accidental discharges with this light. That could play a contributing factor in it too, but there was times when I know for a fact that this light did not go off because I started unscrewing the tail cap after that, where you couldn't press it, and when I would screw it in to actually use it on a fresh battery, the light would indicate that it was dead and it needed to be recharged, or it wouldn't turn on at all. I had a lot of flickering issues also. There's other times where I would turn it on and it would run for a bit and then it would start flickering like it's gonna die, and I'm like, oh, okay, the battery needs change. And then it would just fade out and not work anymore. I would go back to the charger, put the battery on the charger, and see that it's got at least 80% battery in it still. So I decided, you know what, I'm gonna contact them. Even though I've heard all this bad stuff, I should have my own experience to be able to tell you guys. And they were very responsive. They were very quick. The person I talked to basically said, yep, we're familiar with those issues. It is the old spring that you have and the old batteries. Let us send you some new batteries and a replacement spring. I have not had a single issue since. For whatever reason too, I don't know if it's just I'm carrying the light different now because of the ADs. I really haven't had too many ADs as of late with this light, but I have not had once this light flash at me that it had a low battery. So the batteries seem to be lasting as long as they should. I don't have flickering issues anymore. I don't have reliability issues with the light. Overall, I would say this is a really solid option to have. So if you are looking at the Modlite PLHv2, the handheld 18650 version, I would definitely recommend it. But with all that being said, the big thing that I care about is that you guys are prepared and you have a light with you. I think everybody anywhere should have a light with them. Whether that's more oriented as a task light, that's okay. You don't necessarily need the throw that this one has, but if you don't have a light, I would definitely recommend you go out and get one. It is an awesome tool, not only practically speaking for everyday scenarios, but a lot of people don't think about this. Medical stuff, being able to check somebody's eyes, being able to look in a little kid's throat to see what they're choking on and pull whatever it is out if it's close enough up to their mouth. I've actually done that before with this light. And then obviously defensive use as well. So it can be a huge deterrent when somebody wants to approach you and you do that. That can shy certain people away and show that you are not going to be quite as easy of a target as they thought. I hope this video was informative and useful for you, gave you a little bit of insight into what Modlite's all about, so that you can make an informed decision if you want to purchase this light. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below and I'll get to them as soon as I can. Stay safe out there, guys, and God bless.